Hello everybody. So I wanted to do a little bit of an out of order update for you. It's Saturday. I'm over here at Incognito's house where I shoot all of my videos, and we were talking about, what we want to put out, and we actually wanted to do a quick analysis of the Water for Life video. I think that it's probably the best thing I've put out so far, and probably one of the best choreographed routines I've ever done. It was a lot of work to get it there, and I think there's a lot going on, and I think we can sort of break it up and start talking about, well, what goes into it? Like, what are the thought processes? How much of it's choreographed? How much of it isn't? And there's a lot of interesting stuff there, so I think we can get in pretty deep into the mindset of a juggler. So this is going to be really impromptu. I haven't really thought a whole lot about it. I've rewatched the video a couple times, so I put 10 minutes into this, but I put a lot of time into doing the choreography. So let's just, we're going to start the track. I want you to listen to this bit. So this is the robot section, right? There's just like a little bit of robot. And I do want to actually talk about that right now. That robot section came because I was playing around there and trying to figure out what to do on the intro, right? Should I keep talking? Should I start it while I'm doing the Water for Life, McMusty, Incognito, whatever? And I felt like that would be jarring and weird. I wanted the performance to be all end to end. We do all of this stuff uncut. So that is me juggling 5 minutes with no drops. It was awesome getting that, I promise. It only took us like, So I wanted it to be end to end, so we didn't interrupt that. So there's that robot section there just to like fill in the start of it. Then we go into this. And like there's that boing. That one right there, right? And I wanted to play with that, but so this is as far as I get in when I start plotting out a segment. Like for a segment like this, usually I've made my decision about what I sort of want to do in that segment from just that first few bars. Like, what is the feel of that? How do I represent that in juggling? I started here by thinking like, well, what can I do here? Like I can play with like some sort of like spiky trick, or I could like do one of these, or like, I briefly messed around with behind the back tricks for that. I also did some like, just like contacty juggling tricks, like, one ball tricks, like, whoa, ha ha ha, cool. And I thought about doing that sort of thing there, but I didn't like the way it worked. And I spent probably 2 or 3 hours actually trying to put together for just this first minute or so of this segment of the song, something that was along those lines. And then I had the thought and was like, wait a minute, every time it goes boing, why don't I do a double throw, right? And that evolved into the whole section that follows from here for about the next minute, right? Every time there's one of those, my goal was to do a double throw, right? So here we go again, right? And I wanted the double throw, and then I played with variations, so doing the overhand one. And then I'm going to actually fast forward on the track real quick here, because you can go watch that video. I think it's about here. This segment, it's still got that sort of like thing going on, but it's a lot more busy here. So you'll notice if you go back and watch the video, I actually started double timing the double throws. And the reason for that was to catch that busyness of the track. So there's more like, quick juggling pass, another one of these. And it gets a little bit wonky there, but the problem with that section is actually from a choreography and routine perspective, that is the most rhythmically difficult part. You have to have the 2 balls in the right hand at the right time. I could have done left-handed, but I didn't want to because I liked the reset of being the right hand and just playing with my right hand doing those. So it was actually cognizant, right? There are 2-ball releases I'm perfectly capable of from a skill perspective, but I didn't actually want that appearance because nothing had changed in the track per se. It had gotten a little busier, but the same themes and motifs are running through it. So I wanted to stick to just using the right hand for it, which also links me into being right in that rhythm, but you'll notice that rhythm gets off occasionally. So that's what I was thinking for that section, and that's how it played out, but I went through a lot of different iterations and possibilities before I got there. So next section I think is right about here. Let's take a listen. Go. So we're gonna go into like a breakdowny section, right? Right there. Right, and this is another robot section, and again, I played with a bunch of stuff here, so I had thought processes again, like I really wanted to play more with this like, 1 ball or 2 ball or 3 ball, but more like instead of toss juggling, just doing single catches between them, maybe little like sequences where I do one of these and drop the balls everywhere, but like I said, it's impromptu. Incog, could you kick me that? It's
Yeah.
right over there. So, I guess what I'm getting at is I mess around with a lot of stuff to get there. But again, for this section, it's so dead. Like, there wasn't a rhythm to play with. I like this section of the song, but what am I going to do juggling-wise? Like, there's that... And I played with, like, some 3-ball releases for that, and then catching again, and then going back into this stuff. I didn't like the way it worked out. I didn't like the feel of it, so instead I went into the robot stuff, and we went robot-y on it. So from here we move on into the next section. This section, you'll notice, has a lot of spiky throws, and a lot of, like, you know, quick up throws and stuff. And the way that I thought of this, actually, this started during the production of the track. I was around for it, and it's got that little whoop. And I talked about that in Rhythm and Juggling, and I wanted to have that little up throw to represent that. And I liked that, but what I found was it was much easier and fit the music better to have a spike throw that sort of like spiked, and then I would lead into this, right? For a while, though, I was messing with like, oh, this is going to be a, like, you know, cross-handed section. I'm going to do Mills Mess and going to do this one. Like, we're going to do all sorts of cross-handed-y bits. But I didn't like the way that turned out either. So we ended up getting to the conclusion I had, which was like, let's focus on this, like, whip, and let's focus on spiking. Because this section has a very... Right, there's a nice feel there, there's a like nice rest, so it really works well with a spike, and it works well with a spike into particularly one of those. And you'll see that sort of echoed throughout that section from a juggling perspective. So we go past this, because this is all that. Here, this is more funky, so I maintained, and yeah, so that whole bit was for that like 10 to 15 second blob, right? That probably was an hour of choreography to get what I was going to do there. This one gets more funky. You'll notice there's a lot more cross-handed stuff, so that was the application of the cross-handed stuff, but it still comes back to those spikes. So anyways, let's move past this. This gets a little bit more epic, and you'll see that I do a lot more of this stuff, doing big releases with the balls, and then it comes back into spikes. Again, I'm playing with the shape of the music here. I played with some more rhythmic stuff, trying to follow rhythm, but I didn't like that because it didn't feel like it was representing the music correctly. So, oh yeah, I also did some like the behind the back stuff. And like this stuff, I actually really liked the routine, and I had some pretty complex, and I'm dropping everywhere, but don't worry about that. I had some complex like behind the back sequences. So night of, we actually recorded it, and we got to that part and watched it again. It was like, well, that looks completely and utterly terrible in the recording environment we have. So we actually had to re-script that part on the fly from the choreography perspective, because it just wasn't going to work, right? Watching me do this, or I was using this trick. Oops, sorry. One second. Using this trick, right? It doesn't look as good on camera, in my opinion at least. So we went away from that and got to where we were, which was more the cross-handy feel, because I went back to an idea I had earlier and moved away with, and then choreographed the whole like behind the backy stuff, but then it didn't work on camera, so we went instead to cross-handed stuff through this entire section. Right? Nice and funky, it's got that feel. I really like the things that came out with repeated spikes there too. They seem to fit the music really well. There's a nice like bam, ba-dam, ba-dam sort of feel to it, and the spikes really felt like they were getting to the core of that. So the next section is going to be a more like glitchy section. This section, right? And this one, there were all sorts of thoughts here too as well. This is clearly an important section, right? It's got lots of rewinds and different sort of glitched out sections. At first I was actually just trying to go ham and like just really get in there and like just go crazy, and I'm going to do what I want. And the problem with that was it didn't fit with, again, the feel of the music. We thought I could fill in with that, because there's less beats, so we figured, well, you can just go ham there and it'll be great. Didn't work. We recorded it, it didn't work at all. So that's where we ended up actually going to this. We used a lot of stalls in that section, and you'll see things like this. And I played also with the factory, for instance. We went for a more industrialized feel and threw in like, whoop, that sort of movement. For the robot, there's also, I think one of my favorite parts of it, I hit a rewind perfectly with one of these, where the hands actually go and then unwind. And I love the way that came out, but that was mostly just choreographed on the fly, because it was like, well, this thing I thought was going to work really isn't working. I do record at home and watch myself, but it's different when you get in here. So we go through this glitched out section, which is all of that stuff that we were just talking about. And then we come into this part. This part's interesting. I actually, this is one of my favorite parts. It's a little bit rhythmic, but it's a lot more like shape driven than everything else. I shot for rhythm throughout, but this one was like, I just love the way it came out. The rhythm felt right, the shape felt right. We went for more epic, right? This is like the tracks finishing up. So we went for that feel, and that was a lot of these 3-ball releases, as well as some spikes, and there's also a lot of like cross-handed stuff I did, and particularly stealing and moving back across, which felt really appropriate for this rhythm. And I really like the drums that are behind this. They're very consistent, but they're also intricate and nice. So I was playing a lot with those drum beats. At the end of the day, what I'm saying is there's a lot of different pieces that evolved in a lot of different ways. I even forgot one. During the funkier section we looked at, back here, I think, this is about right. This, I was actually doing also a lot of really, yeah, this section right here. This was all really fast cross-handed tricks. Right? So there was even more to it. All this stuff develops pretty organically. I put a lot of time into the choreography beforehand, but when you get to shooting, everything's out the window because you start looking at it with the most critical eye you can and saying, well, that was terrible. And you go back in and try and fix it. And I mean, we take 3-4 hours to shoot that 5-second clip. We probably throw out, I don't know, 20-30 takes at a minimum. We basically go till my arms start giving out, and then we look through the ones where I don't have drops, which if you've tried to juggle for 5 minutes without drops, especially when you're dealing with complicated rhythms, actually the most technically challenging part of that routine was all of these tricks, right? These tricks actually aren't that hard. The problem is when you're trying to keep them in rhythm. You need to have 2 balls in the hands at the right time so that you can throw them at the right... That's the way I go about looking at choreography for one of these things. It's a long process, and it takes into account a lot of different factors. So if you have more questions, come hang out with me. Give me a follow. You can message me if you want to talk choreography and juggling, or choreography and dance. You know, I like that stuff too. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of places. Goblin Juggler. At worst, it'll be Goblin_Juggler. I think that's me on Twitch and Twitter. And then I'm just Goblin Juggler, one word, on Facebook. And, well, if you're on my YouTube, you can just, you know, take a look. And while you're there, push the subscribe button. Come hang out with me. Thank you for watching.